Hello and welcome to What's Your Ism? I'm Sudipto Mondal. And before I introduce you to our guest today, I have a bit of happy news to share with you. We are recording this show in a brand new studio at the Bangalore office of the News Minute. And I just wanted to check out the studio. Bhuvan, can you just turn the camera around? I'm going to do something a little different here to show you this studio. So this is our studio. That's a screen over there. We can keep changing the screens. This is another section where we have the TNM house colors. I like this section a lot. It's got a lot of red. And there we have this other panel, which is different. So these different panels allow us to shoot different kinds of shows. And this has been possible, of course, thanks to your support and all that subscription money that you guys gave us. A lot of that went into funding the studio. There's a lot of work left. Show that, Bhuvan, if you can. There's still some Fevicol cans over there. The door has to be still fixed, but this is pretty much it. Another week and we should be good to go. This is the new TNM studio. Thanks to our readers and our viewers. The most influential ism in the country today appears to be Hindutva. It has taken a long time for this ideology to come of age. But what happened to the other ideological movements that began in the early 20th century? The RSS will turn 100 years old next year, but so will the Communist Party of India. Ambedkarism, Marxism, liberalism, Dravidianism, feminism, Gandhiism. What role are these great big isms of the 20th century playing in the 21st century? What relevance do they have today?
I'm an atheist in the same way as I'm an a-leprechaun.
Why have there been casteism existing in the country still today?
Feminism, by definition, is the belief that men and women should have equal
So the
rights.
nature of the system is to be as mean and rotten as you can, to try to maximize profit.
I'm Sudipto Mondal, and welcome to this episode of What's Your Ism? Now, let's get to the show for today and introduce you to the guest. We have with us a person who will surprise many people by turning up on this show. When he agreed to come on this show, one of the first things my colleague said, he agreed. This is a man who is one of India's most prominent investigative journalists. You must have read his books, The Feast of Vultures and The Silent Coup. He's also the founder of Confluence Media. Now, before I tell you who this person is, let me tell you what Confluence Media did for outlets such as ours. When I say us, I mean the News Laundry, News Minute, Scroll, this entire group of news outlets that keeps coming together to do joint programming. If you remember, we did this special investigation jointly into the electoral bonds when the data came out. So Confluence Media and the kind of, how do I say, intellectual resources that they had were used to train the different journalists from Scroll, from Wire, from News Laundry, the News Minute, to deal with that data, because a lot of our journalists did not know how to deal with that large amount of data, and Confluence did all that training on the fly, so journalists were getting trained as they were putting out stories. The man who made that possible, Confluence Media's founder, Josy Joseph. Thank you for joining us here, Josy.
Thank you, Sudipto. You got a fantastic news studio. All the best. I hope more and more readers are convinced to subscribe to news sites like yours to build more studios and do better journalism. Thank you.
Thank you, Josy. And talking of better journalism, I gave like a very upar se kind of description of what Confluence does. If you were to look online, you will find that Confluence is into documentary filmmaking, it's into investigative journalism, it's doing a whole lot of things. Josy, to start things off, can you tell our viewers what Confluence is and what it's trying to do?
We have been colleagues past in some of the mainstream organizations. I've been part of mainstream media for almost 25, 30 years. I've had, unfortunately, a ringside view of what's going wrong in those mainstream media houses and the business model of journalism, which is heavily dependent upon advertisements and to smaller extent subscriptions. And as you very well know, subscriptions are difficult to scale up. Advertisement model has collapsed, or it is being controlled by government or corrupt corporates, or I mean, people that Anyway, so for the last media model of the last 200 300 years has given up on its core capacity and his core strength of what they were producing. So instead of a New York Times deciding whether a Coca-Cola should advertise on its pages, today the situations come the New York Times with whatever great journalism they do, they will go and beg Coca-Cola to give some ads. Whereas it should be the other way, like the unhealthy drink maker should be pleading with the newspaper saying that please give me an ad space. So the business is, in fact, if you ask me, in my mind, the traditional media model is broken and we need to do something new. And when I was part of the mainstream, I started witnessing censorship kind of like 60-70% of my investigations, which met editorial standards, were not being published. So I opened a folder called Morgue and kept storing them in, then wrote a book in anger. But that was not the solution. So Confluence Media was started 5 years ago to see if we could find a new model to do independent, expensive journalism. And when I say journalism, it is not just about written words. It can be, and that's the other part, which is that if we can't speak to a billion people, I don't think our journalism is making much impact, and which is what I hope one day all of you, News Minute or the news countries of the world, will do. So our idea is to try and do high quality journalism in various formats and scale them to an extent that you have a few million viewers for whatever you do. So on the one end, we do the kind of journalism upskilling or take up projects like that, some of which I don't think we should be discussing. On the other end, we do documentaries for popular platforms. We do podcast, and we are also not yeah we are seriously into scripting. We are scripting series and movies. All of it is drawn from investigative journalism. And in fact, our largest project is based on history, on the birth of Indian Republic.
Right. We'll come to that, Josie. Actually, I wanted to talk about that project of yours. It sounded very interesting. I picked up on some chatter about that project, about the cusp of Indian independence. What are the discussions that happened in the lead up to the independence? But before that, coming back to this confluence model, from the outside, there are a couple of things that stand out as its features. Number one, it's a lot like a ProPublica, which is in the US, where it was an exclusive investigative journalism outlet, which would syndicate its stuff, right? And a lot of what Confluence has done in the last few months, or definitely in the case of the electoral bonds investigation, was that you created a kind of a refinery for the data that was coming in, and you were syndicating it, helping it appear in multiple outlets. Is that correct? And also, is it true that that you see a merit in kind of being a resource for other media outlets as opposed to a front-facing media outlet yourself? What is that model? Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah, first one, I really respect ProPublica, but the fact is that ProPublica, among other global investigative outfits, are all products of a lazy liberal ecosystem, where you got this philanthropists putting a lot of money to run this so-called non-profit. So there is no compulsion on any of them to innovate a model which can sustain itself. So we are completely different in that sense, and we believe that. And I have a very bitter experience with the philanthropy. Between my wife and I, we founded Arimukam.com in Malayalam in 2013.
Yeah.
Siddhi Kapan was one of its stringers. Just 30 days after he was arrested, the foundation which was supporting us just withdrew their support. I mean, I still am struggling with my personal finances because of that. So it's philanthropy is not a very dependable model to scale up anything. The second thing is that because we ran Arimugam and it still continues to make losses for us, I realize that that's going to be a huge drain on us. Third is that we are not doing any syndication. We don't take money from any one of you. We are just providing resources because our revenue is primarily coming from the scripted series, the research we do for projects like or the script movies. In fact, we have just successfully completed one of a large series. Another one, Black Warrant production is complete. So we are finding revenue in those spaces. So we are able to, and we don't have, and thank God that we didn't launch a consumer-facing website like News Minute or News Laundry, because we don't have the daily pressure to feed the monster. So we are able to find time, and beyond all that, Sudipto, very honestly, I think uh, I think what we are witnessing since the rise of Narendra Modi in 2014 is in my career I've never seen a government so autocratic, a public conversation so divisive and so ill-informed on both sides, and the kind of crackdown that we have seen. And equally important is we have never seen a government colluding with select industrialists at this scale. And after having done journalism for 25, 30 years, and whatever skills I've learned, most of it is self-taught, I think it is my responsibility to share those skill sets with uh, my contemporaries or juniors, whoever wants it. And because if there is no democracy to be served, I think all our journalism will go to waste. And we were on the verge of it. I think this last election was some relief, but that's not relief enough. And this, when I say, I'm not talking about the BJP, I'm talking about Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, and his kind of governance that he mastered in Gujarat. So I think, famously what that old saying, it's a republic if you can keep it. And I think it's for you and me to keep this republic. And I don't think, as in the fundamental definition of republic, you and I have the same responsibility, if not more, to this republic than those elected representatives. And I was just doing my job as someone who has been a beneficiary of a thriving republic and democracy. And as someone like you and me, I was very similarly, we all have same backstories, born into very, poor backgrounds, education from government institutions lifting us up and helping us to do things. So I think it's payback time. So
Payback time, and payback in the form of stories, right? And that's I think the exciting part of our profession. So these stories, I do want to. So some of these things that you touched upon briefly, I've kind of created a separate segment for that to discuss in this show. I call it the State of the Nation segment. We'll talk about the state of the nation, but tell me about the stories you're working on. There is something that you are. I mean, I don't know if the name of the how do you put it, the outlet or the OTT platform that is going to put out your story, but there's something cooking over there. There is a series that is coming out. Can you talk about it? Can you tell us what it's about?
So Black Warrant is a co-production we have with Vikramaditya Motwane.
Okay, you can share the name also. Okay, Black Warrant. Okay.
That shooting is complete. The editing is going on, post-production. So I don't have any role in it. It's being produced by Upload Studios, and Vikram is doing it. We have just developed a very exciting show, which I'm not supposed to discuss too much, but
Tell us the outline of the story, the topics, and that.
it's basically, I think, our own experiences as journalists, set in a world of journalism. So it has been quite exciting for us because you'll find a lot of my own experiences there, and we had fun writing it for sure. And the people who had commissioned us, a large institution, whatever it is, they seem to be quite excited about it. So and trust me, there is no unnecessary communal or Indian politics in it. So it's completely.
What is there in it now? I'm very curious. So, okay, let me tell you. See, you are our senior by about a dozen odd years. Okay, Josy Joseph. That name has been this, overarching, presence in newsrooms where investigations mattered. And I dare say there was a small brief window in the Hindu when I was working when Siddharth Varadarajan and all these people were there. There was this exciting time, and WikiLeaks was happening, all kinds of things. So Josy Joseph's name is to come, and one of the things that we would hear about Josy Joseph's lifestyle, these sources he meets in cafes, these secret dossiers that land up at his table, these sources that are hiding somewhere deep inside the state machinery who surface. Now, this story, if it's based in any part on your life, are we going to have these very gripping kind of moments? What is that? Give me some dope on that.
I'll tell you. So I've been off late because I'm trying to learn scripting, and I work with some very wonderful script writers. I've been watching a lot of shows, and there is a huge difference I picked up between non-fiction books and scripting. When you do non-fiction books or long-form writing, you are allowed to write cliches and you can indulge yourself because the audience is very, very accommodative of you. He's going to indulge you. Uh, and even if audience get bored and don't read the book, they don't tell you, "Ki, Sudeep, your book is so boring," But on when you write a show or a film, each word has to be unique and it should draw the story forward. And cliches are such a deadly thing, and it's a completely different and I would say much more challenging craft to write. And that could be the reason why Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who wrote his books, were much more famous than the films he wrote. Uh, so yeah, so which also brings me to the core answer to your question, that I can only write about things I know, right? I mean, that's what I would be most familiar with. So yeah, so that's a premise. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm definitely happy that after a long time, I suppose with this story there'll be a journalist as a protagonist in a story. Often the way we are portrayed in popular media is like along with the police we come towards the end. So I hope so there is some of that, because I think the last show, popular show on air, I think was Reporter with Shekhar Suman. I don't think there's any other show in which the journalist has been a protagonist. Can you remember any? The Jessica Lal thing, maybe, I think.
Yeah, just there have been some fantastic shows in the West, like Newsroom in 2012.
India, I'm saying.
No, India. One of the problems, even of late, I was watching some series. The problem is that the journalism itself, the world of journalism itself, is not very well understood by a lot of writers. And the other thing is, for a lot of writers, the default mode of journalism is television journalism, because television is the most obvious medium.
Yeah.
So shouting, screaming, that what is it? I was watching this show where one journalist gets killed, and you know which show I'm talking about, and the tension is about who is going to talk to the criminal. I mean, who that criminal will spend more time with. And that's a show. I mean, I was in that shit, man. This can't be the journalism that you want to celebrate and believe in. So that's not the story. Story is about journalism, celebrating journalism as an intellectual rigor and activity, and as something which is in the service of society, and something which is a very extremely intelligent social action, and not shouting, screaming, and calling names.
Lovely. I'm looking forward to that. And before that State of the Nation segment, one last question I want to ask about another project that you're involved in, which is, I think, something which opens up a very important conversation in today's time, which is how this nation came about. What was the conversation in the lead up to the formation of the Indian Republic? What is this project? It's a book project. I'm assuming it's a book project, right, that you're working on. You were researching this thing. Now, where is that? What's happening? Can you tell us some insights into what you've put together?
Yeah, Sudipto, it started as an amateurish research 10 years ago, 10, 12 years ago now, when I used to go and sit in National Archives and all that, because something which struck me was that, so, if you look back at 1947 summer, by July, you have the Nehru government taking out a lot of functions, including the Sardar Patel and VP Menon forming the State Department and all that. So that's the first time when wonder of India that we know is actually princely states. And my curiosity began from there. But I started looking at documents and realized that there's a massive amount of history that has not been mined, reported properly for various reasons, including the fact that many of it are still buried in the government files, because whatever British did is very well documented in transfer of our papers and other documents. But whatever the interim government of Nehru did is not really recorded properly. And especially when you come into June, July, August, that 3 months of the summer, it's utter chaos, and those files nobody has seen it fully. We have heard anecdotes. So I said, no, wait, you got princely states like Nizam of Hyderabad, man. He just sponsored 3 squadrons of Air Force for British war efforts, built a massive naval ship for them, the HMS Nizam, which was at Japanese Bay when the Japanese troops are, Tokyo Bay when Japanese troops are surrendering. I mean, he has got battle-hardened troops, soldiers back from who are actually recruited from Baluchistan and other places. I said, it can't be that everything was a meek show and there was something more to it, right? So that's where I came from. But as we started collecting documents, we realized, man, there is so much of history that is to be written. And I think it is not something unique. I think Indian freedom and Indian independence and Indian birth of Indian Republic has not been celebrated enough. And if you look at American Civil War, I think there are over a dozen films just on it, and there are hundreds of books on it, right? You look at the French Revolution, look at we haven't celebrated enough. So I'm not saying when I found these documents, I'm not saying I'm challenging another historian. I'm saying that I'm just trying to add to it because we have a skill as journalists. I mean, not all the journalists, but some journalists do have patience. So over 10 years, we have been able to collect hundreds of thousands of documents, and these documents start basically the first book out of it. So we are calling it. We initially call it Birth of a Nation. Then many people said, "Oh, it's a Hollywood racist film's name." I said, "No, we could salvage it." But anyway, I think it's going to be a series of books and documentaries and podcasts and scripted series and films. That's our ambition, and we are calling it Nothing But a Republic series. That's what is in our mind. The first product, the first book is going to be out. I'm just completing the book. It's the last 20-25 days that made India, almost made India, because
Sneak peeks, please.
Eh?
Give us some sneak peeks. So what happened in those last 25 days? Some highlights.
Last 25 days, so much more happened than we understand from public narratives. For example, I'll tell a simple story that in Trivandrum, there was an attack on the Diwan Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer by a militant insurgent on 25th of July. Now, that has never been read in the larger context of the princely states, because what was C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer's role in the larger conspiracy of the princely states to secure their freedom is never been really dug into. The most authoritative book on CP's period of as Diwan is by Sridhara Menon, but even his book doesn't just as passing. I mean, there is, but what I found was that there is the Bhopal Nawab is saying that he's our most important advisor, and then you look at Hyderabad papers and related to Hyderabad Nizam, you see that actually C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer lands in the aerodrome there, and you have Nizam's most important advisor and the Prime Minister rushing to the airport to confer with him. So there was a large organized conspiracy by princely states and not just Muslims and all kinds of everyone who had little power. And in fact, Baroda, which had declared that it will be the first princely state to sign the instrument of accession, itself was finally having second thoughts about whether to join India. And Indore, for example, Holkar, he was actually also dithering at the last moment, and very interesting things. And also our public narratives are very limited to, when it comes to princely states, it's limited to Nehru, Patel, BP Men. But the fact is that there was
Kashmir and Hyderabad. Mostly it's focused on Junagadh, Kashmir,
and
Hyderabad.
Junagadh, yeah. But the fact is that there was almost like a small army of people, about half a dozen people in Delhi, in South Block, and a few of them on the ground, and they were scrambling. So what you can see is by the 8th of August, you have this guy, you have this senior officer who is actually writing down a plan to put economic and probably military sanctions on Indore, because he says Indore is the first one we can pull down. I mean, we can bring online, not Nawab, not Nizam, anybody. So he's actually writing down steps about what to do with Indore. So these kind of things we have never heard anywhere. Nobody has seen these things. I don't think it's there in any book. So for me, it's a very exciting, almost revising certain parts of the birth of Indian dominion, and in fact, it's strange that it's a lot of funny things, a lot of funny and interesting things. For example, there is British military intelligence which says that the Navanagar, Jam Sahib of Navanagar has a British guy who's converting a Second World War naval vessel into a yacht to smuggle 20 tons of gold to buy weapons. And Navanagar, Jam Sahib for us, in large parts of narrative, is a very nationalistic guy. You have the Nizam thing is very well known, but you even have people like ruler of Dholpur, who's a small Chambal side, small kingdom, saying that I don't want to be part of this dominion. So what I'm saying, a lot of things happened, and I think 2-3 things have not been fair to the birth of Indian Republic. One is, I think, the governments after that have been so busy with firefighting and this thing that we have not been really looking at documenting and celebrating those moments and all the heroes. For example, one of the people who is playing a stellar role in all of this is the classmate of Subhash Chandra Bose from Cambridge. He and Bose sat
What's his
for
name?
CC Desai. Both sat for ICS exam. Both passed. And Subhash Chandra Bose, both sat because of their family pressures. And Subhash Chandra Bose, as you know, finally refused to sign to be a servant of the king. And Desai gave in to the family pressure and became a civil servant. He's one of the key people leading. Who knows about it? You got somebody who, I mean, many of these people, I find them are not in footnotes. Some of them are mere footnotes. But it's crazy about what's happening. It's almost like spy, like deep within the Nizam's palace, there is a very senior officer who is actually keeping Delhi posted on a daily basis from starting July about what Nizam is up to. And he's a member of the council. He's a minister there. So he could have been, he was risking his life. So those kind of stories. So I'm hoping that the first book should hopefully be out by end of the year. And after that, I'm hoping to expand the project to see if we can accommodate more young writers who want to write, history, popular history books. And this is nothing to do with the political divides we are witnessing. And we are not trying to feed into any of the narratives. And that's the saddest part, because I think we have seen bigger empires in history, but they were all created with brutal force. But human history has never seen such a large geographical mass with so much diversity, people living together under a returned peaceful constitution, which is very unique in human history of last, let's say, about 100,000 years. So to me, that celebration has to be done. And that celebration is the best way to tell our people and awaken them about the fact that every child can dream of a better future, and the state can make that dream come true.
Right, the dream of a modern Indian state. Now, when we talk about that, Josie, now correct me if I'm wrong, the reason why a project like this is important, you talked about the existence of princely entities outside of this binary kind of understanding we have of that period, in which we look at the whole conversation as being defined by the Hindu-Muslim question. In terms of, like we started off, people must have wondered why we mentioned Kashmir or Hyderabad or Junagadh, because the whole conversation post-independence somehow has been shaped by these considerations, to the extent that if someone has to go back and pull out data from history, you're going and pulling out data in relation to what happened in Kashmir or in relation to what happened during Operation Polo. But some of the states, the princely states that you mentioned over here, the fact that they were Hindu states that were opposed to the Republic of India as a secular republic, that those are the conversations, I think, which will slightly add texture to our understanding of that period outside this Hindu-Muslim thing. Do you think?
Of course, that's the other thing. I don't know why we keep fighting over little petty things instead of celebrating the greatness of who we are. And see, for example, on July 18th, King George signs the instrument of India's Independence Act, and a few hours later in Travancore, the Maharaj actually declares Travancore independence. Okay, and it's a Hindu kingdom. He's congratulated by two people. One is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and other is Savarkar. So power those days, it was a different India, and to desperately try to whitewash a Savarkar who towards freedom period was because of his whatever animosity towards Gandhi or whatever the reasons maybe, is as equally stupid as not to appreciate his contributions in his early young days to the cause of Indian freedom. So I think it's much more layered. We need to be open, and we will never win if we do these discussions. And for example, Patel Nehru, Mountbatten and then however Bhopal are so relieved that Patel is going to be heading the Department of States, because Nehru is the most unapologetic, most aggressive guy among the lot against the rulers. But in our narrative, Patel is Iron Man. But actually, it is Nehru who said nothing but a republic when he introduced the first resolution in Constituent Assembly in 1946 in December about the future of India. He says, and in the first resolution, you will not find the word democratic, but you will find India will be nothing but a republic. And it was Nehru. Patel was the more moderate, adjusting guy. He actually allowed the Nawab of Bhopal to keep his decision on joining Indian Dominion secret for 10 days, and he had the freedom to withdraw that till August 25th. Now, does that make Patel bad? No, Patel is also the guy who's, pulling in the forces, and I think it was a generation of geniuses and great men, and we small men and small women of our times are reducing those great men into debates and discussions which we are not actually not capable of. So what we should do at best is to try and understand them and not try to assess them. I think that's a foolishness we are doing.
Now, after that phase of great men and women, we have this entire period of tiny men and women. Why do I say that? I want to now get into this state of the nation question, right? And that, to my mind, in relation to you, is divided into two segments in terms of there is the parallel state and then there is the deep state. Okay. The parallel state for me is all of what is there in Feast of Vultures, where in that book, oh my goodness, this rabbit hole, this maze that you go into to describe in very, very great detail about how, so there is the government, there is civil society, there is bureaucracy, and then connecting all these things is almost like an umbilical cord, an entire chain network of these middlemen and women. That India has become a country that is run by middlemen, middlewomen. You say, and I quote you here, what allows them to be so blatant is that the Indian economy, especially the government sector, is dependent on them to keep the wheels moving, and the fact that politicians and bureaucrats are on their payroll. These little men and little women, and you take such a wide sweep in terms of, you start with a small village in Bihar, which is called, Hridaychak. There's a village called Hridaychak in Bihar, from where you start this story, and you talk about the middlemen over there, people who make the wheels move. Then the story expands, and before you know it, you're talking about arms dealers such as the Nandas. You're talking about the Chaudharies. You're talking about how these people cannot be wished away. These are people who are on a list of 23 blacklisted people by the CBI, saying, there's a notice over there saying that all government departments beware of these 23 men and entities. Don't do business with them. But then you say that they are still in business. They are still defining this whole, defense arms sector, for example. Wow. Now my question to you is really, how do we theorize this space? How do we understand it in terms of ideology? Although you are very insistent in saying that there is no ideology over here, money plays a role, connections play a role, but I can't help but notice the fact that these are men mostly coming from certain religions, perhaps even certain caste groups, right? What does that say about this system that keeps India supposedly, oiled? Is there an ideology there?
Sudipto, to address the first part of your question, which is about is there a dominant religion caste, I think I don't think it is deliberate, and I think every man and woman who has found the opportunity to climb the ladder of power has been using it. Yes, it reflects largely the historic context where you have the upper caste and the privileged elite Muslims or the Hindu Christians representing in much higher number, and the disadvantaged communities, the elites, etc., representing in lower number. But if we were to give an opportunity to a Dalit or a poor Muslim to be in that corridor, and I've seen many of them here, they are not the ones to say no. So I think integrity is not necessarily a function of religion or caste. So is
Access is though.
yeah,
Access though is.
so is greed, but access does the game. Access is the defining game changer, right? And there you see journalists, you will see bureaucrats, politicians, middlemen, uh, all kinds of people. The moment you have access, they all use it to their advantage, and most of them to make money, because India is a very rich country. I mean, we might have too many poor people, but we have a lot of money out there. So that is, and it was monopolized by what uh, Narendra Modi very famously is called the Khan Market Gang, which to a great extent is true. But the fact is that Khan Market Gang only get replaced by a new Khan Market Gang. Doesn't
The
go away.
Ahmedabad gang, Surat Ahmedabad gang.
Whatever, yeah, whatever. I mean, but they ultimately have to land up in Khan Market and surroundings, because that's where the seat of power is. So there is, and in fact, I have never seen such a centralized corruption of government in my career. And I think, for example, the investigations into Adani Group is going to go on for years to come. And whatever they may try to do, whoever they jail, whatever the agencies that they unleash, the fact is that Adani Group, the amount of government facilities and privileges they have received is going to unravel. Okay, so are the middlemen they have come up in the last decade, and these middlemen are not similar different from the middlemen of the previous decades. So I don't know whether we can put a caste or a religious definition to it, but we can definitely put access as a part of it. And access historically has been more available to what we see as a privileged groups, and it cuts across religions. But you can also find a lot of people from underprivileged classes who have made their way into Delhi and power corridors, especially in the last 2-3 decades of post-Mandal period. I find many of them out there who are equally opportunistic about the access to exploit.
And you insist that there is no caste and religion over there, and in spite of that, in that book, there's this very tragic character. I really feel for him, Taqiyuddin, right? This founder of East West Airlines, this unicorn, the India's first private airline, and how he gets done in by a system in which a Naresh Goyal of Jet Airways, all his dirty games, and the extent of the dirty games, my goodness, sending a person who is his employee to work in Taqiyuddin's East West Airlines to get all their secrets, and all those kind of dirty games, in addition to how agencies of the state defeat this man. His murder, his investigation. That is why and you're coming close where you say that the country is changing in terms of this Hindutva takeover and all of that, but still you insist that had he just, despite being a Muslim, had he just gone with a bipartisan attitude, and instead of being a Congress supporter, instead of having some ideals about, let's say, even secularism, which you kind of speculate about, let's say that he was ideologically a supporter of the Congress, he was a student leader in the Congress and all of that. Had he just been a little bipartisan, given little money here and a little bit there, he wouldn't have been in that situation. Do you think that continues to be the case? Since, I mean, Taqiyuddin died many years ago. Today, for a Muslim businessman, you think there is hope for that person to just oil both sides and still exist? I know the Bohras have done that to some extent with Modi.
You'll be very surprised to know how many Muslim Christian businessmen are extremely successful in oiling the existing machinery and are having comfortable life. And in fact, sometime when we meet, not on camera but in private, we should talk about the entire India Gulf corridor and the money and the kind of people moving around. It's very secular. It's a very secular movement that's happening, and it's frightening scale of movement of money, people, extortion, business. What do we call it? So
Mauritius.
Yeah, huh?
Mauritius in the middle of all of this.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, your book says that 41 or 42% of our investments came from Mauritius.
There used to be a time when just 1 or 2 buildings in Mauritius used to be responsible for 40-45% of our FDI investment because of the double taxation avoidance treaty between India and Mauritius. But Mauritius continues to be a very important center for all the stock market manipulations that we are witnessing. And that's what the recent Adani investigations have shown. And I think it's a shame that instead of um, ensuring the investors' confidence in the market and market regulator, the government and the market regulator is beating around the bush. And it has huge repercussions, especially when it comes to see right now because of the China factor, a lot of hot money is coming into India and all that. But I can tell you, I mean, my at least my contacts and friends in large investment funds, long-term investors are all saying that no, we are not going to put money into India at least because there is a problem with judiciary, there is a problem with the market regulator. It's a big concern. And whatever people might say otherwise, I think under Narendra Modi government, India's institutional integrity has really gone down, and I mean, we were lucky that China suspicion of China suddenly went up at the same time. So by default, the Indian Modi regime got protected, but otherwise we are in deep trouble.
I'm still, I know there'll be a longer conversation after this off the record, but can you tell our audience a little bit more about this Gulf corridor that you speak of? What are we talking about? What is this corridor? What is the nature of? Is it just finance capital and shell companies? Is that what we're talking about? Is there some commodity involved?
All kinds of things are happening. Gold is for an example. Gold, UAE has become probably the most important gold supplying smuggling center for India. Look at Indian airports, wherever you land, whenever there is a catch, and that is occasional catch, you'll see where it is coming from. You talk to bankers in Dubai, names of some of our very favorite people are buzzing there about their investments in Dubai and surroundings, in shopping malls and apartments and this and that. I'm not talking about the purchase of houses by Mukesh Ambani, which is official, or Shah Rukh Khan owning houses, but I'm talking about other kind of buzzing. You look at the Adani Group allegations, all of it is happening largely controlled from Dubai, where Mr. Vinod Adani is sitting with a Cyprus passport. You look at some of our most notorious, controversial businessmen, startup guys, they're all out there in Dubai. Yeah, I mean, so we are talking about Dubai and the Gulf region, especially UAE, being this dark hole of the new financial world, which once Switzerland used to be. Switzerland is now tiny before that.
Does it have something to do with Mohammed bin Salman's attempts to diversify, move out of oil and?
No, it has a lot to do with the way they're building up Dubai as a financial cosmopolitan center for anybody to come and live, have a good life. So it's like an island of happiness. But the fact is that it has become every other large database you look at, you see a Dubai connection. When you look at an Afghan government money being looted out, it lands in Dubai. Bangladesh, the Sheikh Hasina regime's loot, money lands up in Dubai. You look at the Indian new plutocrats that we have, the rumor is in Dubai. You look at the big business conglomerates, Dubai. So there is a huge, and it's a challenge. And as you know, FATF has previously has told Dubai to clean up. But the fact is that this is, and I think even Mauritius or Singapore is no match for Dubai when it comes to the kind of shadow games happening and shadowy deals happening. So one of our young favorites his name is all over the banking channels in Dubai. His investments are a big talk of the town, though I have never been to Dubai. I mean, I keep hearing it, yeah.
Young favorites. Is he in politics or is he in business? Is he in sport?
I think he's all over.
He's
No.
all over.
So I think we should not, because
Okay.
defamation cases are a very, it's a pain. It's a defamation cases in India are actually irritants. It's a waste of time. So I would.
No, of course. No, but Joshi, like whenever I read your stuff, right? I mean, your articles, I've heard your talks, and of course, your book and all of that. It makes me wonder. Here I am as a political journalist, covering some NRC protest, some Rohit Vemula agitation, some Una, this thing. Some farmers protest, and here we are thinking that these are things which are shaping the country, or perhaps even shaking the country, if not shaping the country, and all of that. And then we, when we read you, we are made aware that there is this completely different world in which these are very superficial developments, and that this world exists and will exist despite whatever political changes might happen. Because we are talking, you paint an entire timeline of these offshore accounts, how this regime, particularly post the 90s, has enabled some of these kind of entities. You talk about the CBI's conviction rate, for example, being some 2%, 3%. The flight of capital, right? You talk about how, so the year in which you put down a statistic, you say in, I think, 2015-16, some 4,000 millionaires decamped, in the sense that they changed their domicile status, and so that in order to benefit from tax exemptions, while on the street you had some Rohit Vemula agitation, right? So how does a political activist, a progressive activist, understand this kind of capital, this kind of economy? How do we engage with it when it doesn't even appear to us on the surface? We don't even perceive its existence.
I think that's a story of all societies. It happens, but but do keep in mind that the agitations on the street are largely informed by the findings of the parallel state, or what do we call it, right? Now, for example, last 10 years, if you look at India, while Modi may have controlled the mainstream, the fact is that the findings of that, the corruption, the crony capitalism, etc., has actually seeped into the Hindi heartland and everything. And that is where you saw the protests and everything emerging. So it is no less important than the investigation. So it both feed into each other, and both are critical to it. One needs that fodder, but this fodder doesn't. So, okay, I mean, for a lot of journalists like me who are patiently looking at things, taking time, what is it? The final motivation is that the fact that the public is responding and they're informed, and so, and that is what people like you report to the people, and that's what makes work of journalists like ours. So I think it is all part of a larger ecosystem that exists in any society which is trying to be progressive. And people might say, oh, there is social media, nobody's listening to you. No, actually, in the last 10 years, the impact of investigative journalism has been far higher than anything that we have seen in a long time. We may not recognize it today, because we will say, oh, Josie, you were in UPI, you did all those others and this and that. But I was part of India's largest newspaper, man. I used to write on the front page of it. And it used to be picked up by all these jokers who are now jumping around doing Hindu-Muslim comedy on their TV channels. So I would have instant millions of viewers in the morning for my investigations. Today, if an investigative journalist were to put out a story, the mainstream doesn't even ignore. In fact, mainstream would be carrying denials. So that impact that is happening over the last 8-10 years, and that's real journalism that's happening. So I think we are passing through the golden era of Indian journalism. So whenever you report a Vemula protest, do know that you are actually being part of the most important adversarial journalism that India has seen, definitely since emergency, probably the most important moment after independence.
That lifts my morale so much. Thank you for saying that. Sometimes we wonder why we do what we do, at given the constraints that we work under. And you saying that kind of lifts the spirits a little. Now, but this last point about this crony capitalism, you use that term, and a traditional Marxist would say this is just capitalism for you. And the reason I say bring that up is to ask you, with a more left-oriented policy, are we, this kind of finance capital is the problem, in terms of how money can make money without constructing anything, without manufacturing anything. Money can make money, money can keep making money, and that is an essential feature of how modern capitalism has worked. Even going back to the times of the East India Company and how they used to hedge and bet and things like that. So, is it a nature of capitalism to be like this? Or you think that there is essentially some difference between crony capitalism and capitalism? Because if there is, then show me the good capitalist.
I think so. I think we should not undermine or underestimate the contribution of good capitalism in developing the sea routes, which may have contributed to colonialism. or the undersea cables, and all the technological developments that we have seen. It's all largely thanks to capitalism. But the fact is that there are moments in this in history when capitalism sometimes oversteps itself, and as you said, it becomes a game of making money against money. So you wouldn't mind investing $19 billion to buy a WhatsApp at a time when humans have not developed a new antibiotic in 3 decades. So that happens, that slip up happens, and you might end up showering billions on technologies developed by someone who was trying to create a website to compare girls in his class, becoming Facebook. That happens, but I think I'm a votary of free market, and I think free market has got a lot of things to contribute. And I am sure, as someone of your background and thinking, you'll agree with me that capitalism creates cities, and free cities provide a lot of sanctuary and courage to a lot of people from disadvantaged groups. So I don't want to. I'm in fact, a lot of people after reading my book called me up, write to me saying that you're a communist. I believe in capitalism and free market, but when that free market is compromised, that is when we find whether it's the rise of all the social media in the West, which has contributed to so much of bad things around the world, not just some revolutions, which were short-lived. But I think capitalism has a lot of good side. If you look at all the isms that you talk about, I'm not. But even in a capitalist state, I think the state itself, capitalistic market, I think the state itself has a role to play, which is it is to be the guardian of welfare of its people. And that is not communism, if somebody were to say. That's not in socialism. That is a state's role to ensure that every child can go to bed with a stomach full of food and sleep happily and dream widely. That's a privilege. That's a state's responsibility. And this comes from the last 400 years of nation state formation. We pay taxes so that we can have a standing army to protect the borders, but we also pay taxes for better roads and better water supplies, right? And better schools. So I think that we don't need to have a socialist state to be responsible to provide welfare to the people. Providing welfare is its default duty. So we don't need to dissect about, hey, is India a socialist state? Do we need socialism in the constitution or etc.? No, whether it's in India or US, you think America is not providing the kind of welfare supports it's providing to its people? You look at the COVID era, it's we who left our people on the streets. All the capitalist countries were providing salaries and subsidies and all kinds of allowances. We just gave some rice and dal to our people. So I'm saying that there is a certain kind of, what has happened is that the ideological negotiations or debates that have been after Karl Marx, because he was such a heavy weight on everybody. Very few have been able to come out of that and try to redefine. And I think by the time we hit the late 80s and the Washington Consensus Reaganomics emerged, where it said the state should be minimal. But I think even the Americans have gone back from there. They realize that state has a job to do, and that is not to be called socialism. I think it's called a responsible state. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly.
No, of course. And I know that there are people sitting out there who must be thinking, but that exactly is what is socialism, state intervention. So we're not, okay, we'll leave it at that. But, another question that pops up about this corruption thing, right? So I was, one of the things I take a lot of interest in is this medieval history of India, and the people who came and who were witness to it. You have these Chinese monks who were traveling into India in search of Buddhism, in fact, which is, they were looking at what Buddhism looks like in Nalanda, in the place of its origins and all of that. They came traveling, and in doing so, they described how Indian society works. They talked about gender relations, they talked about caste relations. One thing that they also talked about was this cultural corruption that whether it's the Vijayanagara Empire, I've read some accounts of the Vijayanagara Empire, I've read accounts of the Mughal time, where travelers come and they're literally aghast at how this speed money system works, where the entire bureaucracy doesn't function without this little something. And that is what this middleman person is also all about in modern day India, making all these wheels turn. So my question to you is India just another basket case in terms of this is how a post-colonial state looks? Most post-colonial states have this issue of corruption, bureaucracy, or is something unique about India culturally, where we're talking about, something which is historic and ingrained in our system, where there is no direct relationship with God. There has to be an intermediary.
No, actually, my belief is slightly different in that sense. I think Hinduism is the most beautiful religion in the world because it is one religion that allows you. There is no intermediary actually. Like you're allowed to deal with the God directly. I mean, it gets corrupted. All religions get corrupted, but no, I am saying that there is no. You, I mean, we have all been all over the world, been to many countries. If you ask me, I don't think there is a more beautiful nation, more beautiful, more more humane country than India, with all our drawbacks, all our
All our
problems.
drawbacks.
There is nothing. I mean, there is no other place where I can walk into a home and be assured that a cup of tea is going to be served. And very few places where if there is genuine distress, somebody will be there to help you. So I think we have got a lot of great things going for us. Corruption. We should talk about corruption in a more holistic way. See, there is corruption in the West too. In fact, yesterday, I don't know if you saw, I think yesterday or last night, only the deputy chief of staff of the New York mayor was arrested for being a Chinese spy, and she was accepting some cooked food and all that as bribe or whatever. But I'm saying, see, corruption exists all over the world, but it is usually at the higher levels. So we call those societies corruption free because in daily lives, corruption is not a factor. There, if you go and park your car, you can take a ticket. If you don't take the ticket and pay whatever is expected, police will issue a challan and that's end of the story. But in India, that is where the negotiation begins, right? So I think corruption in daily life is our problem. We need to fight that. And that fight has to happen if we could clear our politics of black money. And that fight back will happen if we have got more civil society and more, strengthened NGOs, which is one of the frameworks that Modi government has been further damaged, But I don't think we are culturally corrupt or anything. We are culturally good people. I think India is a great country.
No, I say that because I see these indices that keep coming up, right? Where India ranks, there's this corruption index and all of that, and we invariably land up somewhere. And I'm wondering if there's some root to this. But anyway, we'll leave that as one of those things. But I want to move on to this other segment, Josy, this deep state question. Right? We talked about the parallel state, this deep state, and when I talk about the deep state, I want to talk about the Josy Joseph I knew when I was a reporter in Mangalore in the mid 2000s, working in the Hindu, and that was the time of these blasts and these terror investigations, Indian Mujahideen, Simi, these people getting picked up from out of nowhere, suddenly you have, and of course, because I'm in Mangalore, you're writing about a Riaz Bhatkal somewhere, all of you people were writing about these stories. And one thing I noticed about you is that you were a tribe by yourself in terms of you were not doing this typical internal security reportage. I don't even know if it's reportage or if it's just fiction writing, because I used to work for the Hindu. I don't know if I should take his name, but there was a very prominent gentleman over there who used to write these fables, This man was 13 years old when he went to buy sweets at this shop. The shopkeeper gave him a CD along with the sweet, and that's where his indoctrination happened. That person grew up to be this, And how do you know this? Because of your R&AW, sources, your IB sources. These fables were appearing in the Hindu, in Times of India. And then there's a Josy Joseph who's talking about other things, which is how the machinery, the investigative agencies itself are internally, how do I say, rotten, they're eaten away, sometimes by their own ideologies, right? You saw the emergence. At the same time, you had this Colonel Purohit kind of characters also emerging, right? The one thing I used to think about back then as a young reporter about you is that how lonely this man must be, right? Because you have this bunch of internal security reporters, all swashbuckling, high-profile fellows who are jumping from one city to another, and then there's this Josy Joseph who's saying that, no, wait a second, this investigation is something wrong. What was that period like for you? Can you talk about that? We'll talk about the politics later. As a reporter, as a human being so alone in that tribe.
No, yeah, I mean, I don't personally don't feel loneliness. I'm always, I'm very bindas and happy in my life. I used to feel sorry for many of them because very obvious, stupid things that they would write out as very authentic, authoritative narratives with such specificity that one started feeling sympathy for them because one knew where the source is. The second part of it was that uh, okay, many of the journalists of my generation and seniors or even are mostly many of them are UPSC failed candidates.
That is the best candidate for a journalism job. Yeah, yeah.
And I but don't ask me before you ask me. I haven't taken a UPSC exam. Okay, so many of them are in awe of the organizations, institutions, the government, the bureaucrats, all that. The moment you are awestruck by an authority, you are not qualified to be a journalist. You have to respect, but do not be awestruck by them. And I think a lot of people who come in to cover intelligence and security, it is probably for most of them the first time they're getting exposed to that world. And second, they are in their mind, like the way a lot of public think about journalists. In their mind, their idea of spies and or these intelligence organizations or security establishments are shaped by the films and books they've read or the narratives that they've read. So they think James Bond actually exists, and they actually think that
He does, no?
that's what I'm
Mr.
saying.
Doval is James Bond, no?
No, I've known Mr. Doval for such a long time. But the fact is that, and to be fair to Mr. Doval, he's a very good field operative. Huh? You have to give to him. But what I'm saying is, they commit this grandeurs about these people, and once you are trapped in that grandeur, you cannot then clinically report. Journalism is at the end of the day is a very academic exercise, and you are not. And this is the other part. A lot of journalists also come to they're in goodwill hunting mode. They think that tomorrow morning when I go back to the PRO, he should be very happy with me, or when I meet the military chief, he should appreciate me, or at the press conference, the minister should recognize me. Journalism is not about that. Journalism is fundamentally about service. You have been allowed entry into a very privileged career without any entry barriers. Anybody can walk in to become a journalist, but to stay there with the reputation and the integrity is a challenge. And that is where you got to realize that you are not you are not trying to win elections. If you are most unpopular, that it speaks a lot about you as a good journalist. The other part of it is a lot of journalists who cover security establishments end up taking a lot of favors from them. So if you're covering defense, then defense messes are available to you. Some people might even get subsidized liquor. Intelligence often offers whatever benefits that you need. Now, once you take that favor and all that, then you're gone forever. You have to then oblige them. The third is, which is, I must say, say this. You took Doval's name, Mr. Doval or any other officer of seniority or junior people. If you're professional, most of them are actually quite respectful of you, and they will actually respect you more than the ones who are available on sale and are compromised. And they find it better use of their time to meet someone like you who is not on sale than to meet one of their chelas who is already sold and anytime can be told to write this, right? So I've had a great run. In fact, one thing that a lot of my contemporaries, I don't know whether know this or not, is that I really have a lot of friends in the agencies. And after my book, The Silent Cook, came out, I've received several calls from serving officers saying that, man, I read this entire book just to know that what is your opinion of me, so I think I don't think India's intelligence operatives or military is as bad as some might say. It's a professional outfit, and to gain the respect is a challenge, and it's not easy. I agree with you. So a lot of journalists give into the easy way out. Yeah, I mean, I 2006 onwards, I think, ever since the first Malegaon blast, it had a long time of actual, it's not, I can't call it difficulty, but it was quite a stupid period because, I was being lectured by senior intelligence officers about the Barelvi bases Diobandi fight in Islam, and I've had people writing stories because just because of the fact that on the day of the blast, I filed an analysis which appeared next day along with the blast story. Mr. R. Jagannath and Jiggy was my editor. He put it on the front page where I said intelligence sources are saying do not ignore the Hindu right-wing extremists because there have been some small blasts that have happened in Malegaon and surrounding areas. I mean, I was just speaking to two sources who told me the same thing. I wrote in the story. Not that I had any great information or this thing. And that, from there, it triggered such an, effort to convince me about what is Islamic terrorism, what does it happen to you, to educate me. And then it triggered a tsunami of coverage in bigger newspapers about what you said. Such specificity about, what time the terrorist came, which time his car stopped, what did he eat, what did he drink. And then that kind of coverage then kept piling up and up. And before we realized, we lost hundreds of our people to a terror group which was parallelly bombing India while the Indian Mujahideen was bombing India. So there are two terror groups bombing India, killing our innocents, and our idiotic media was letting our agencies get away without proper investigations or proper audit. And our people died. Innocent people died. And we still don't know the full conspiracy of this because somebody said to politicize everything. Somebody said, no, Hindus can't be terrorists. Boss, if you're an intelligence operative, your job is not to impress some politician. Politician will play every card to win votes. Your job was to find out, did these people, and you know what? In that group, the most important terrorist is still missing. Huh?
Which one are you talking about? The Indian Mujahideen.
The other group. Indian Mujahideen, except most of them are in jail, and I think Shahid Bilal, I think the other chaps got killed. Not Bhatkal fellow got killed in, I think, Karachi. That's what I hear. I'm saying on the others group, we still have terrorists missing. What is your guarantee that they are not being propped up by ISI? I think it's high time that we Indians sat back, took a deep breath and said, boss, we are being fooled by our politicians, with this Hindu-Muslim divide. We are actually not that. We are a much better country. We are far better than the sum of our parts, I think that pride we have to take and deal with issues like that. And it's quite sad. I see a lot of my friends, people I admire, losing their marbles, talking rubbish. And they don't realize what they do, when they make those comments. They don't realize what they're doing to themselves, their soul, and to the soul of others who appreciate and used to admire them.
Because, this not losing the marbles, I suppose, translates into the kind of story that you did on Taqiyuddin. I keep coming back, what a heartrending story and how well you've put that story together. And not losing your marbles essentially in that story meant not going with that narrative that Dawood Ibrahim bumped him off. You talk about how there was an intercept in which Chota Shakil, who is, Dawood's man, he's in conversation with Naresh Goyal, and the intelligence agencies are talking about a business rivalry being the cause, the Jet and the East-West Airways rivalry being one of the reasons that could have been behind the murder. Whereas at that time it was talked about, even Chota Rajan claimed responsibility for it, saying that I bumped him off because he's a Dawood guy. This whole thing of even questioning that premise, which is, was he a Dawood guy or not? How you unpack that whole thing and just lay out the facts. I mean, you can make out that you are not being ideological there, you're not being, taking a slant or anything. It's just like arranging the facts together, and then what emerges is very telling. And it's telling also in a string of such cases, right? When you talk about the deep state, you're talking about the murder of a Haran Pandya. You're talking about how a home minister of a state can be bumped off like a nobody, and you collected evidence to show that how his, he might possibly would have been killed somewhere else and then dumped inside his Maruti 800, how his body was discovered. And then to perpetuate that one lie, you create another lie of the Shorabuddin and the fake encounters. And then you have this, this whole fable about the attempt to assassinate Modi. All of these things, and you are looking at a bunch of people who are suspended officers, who are, either sitting police officers, all kinds of shady characters operating in this. And there is definitely this ideology that you're talking about over there, that they are so colored by this worldview, so convinced in this Islamic terror, this this monstrosity that they imagine Muslims and Islam to be. That is not going anywhere, right, Josie? I mean, political change will not. Do you see it changing the nature of our security establishment? You talk about how few Muslims there are in the police, in the army, in R&AW.
So, two, three things. One is that India always has this every second decade we go through this, high communalism and then it drops. I think that is over. That is why Modi is unable to, hold on to many of his narratives anymore, and it's not working. So that's a good part. That communalism, Modi might come back as a good administrator, I don't know, but the communal divide game is not working because it has peaked. Second is that if you look at any democracy in the world, whether in the past the direct democracies or the present indirect democracies, all democracies and all progressive societies are work in progress. It's constant. We can't drop the ball. So if R&W doesn't have Muslims in the ranks, we are hoping and pushing and pressurizing to get more representative, right? There is no perfect society or perfect organizations. So that is a process, and that's a process we all enjoy, right? You and I enjoy. I mean, when you talk about the historic monstrosity that has been perpetuated on certain groups of people, you are actually participating in an intellectual debate to say, hey, give these people more rights. If you didn't have that opportunity to make that argument, you would be such a dull human being, right? So there is nothing to be regretful about it. We need to keep fighting for it. But the fact is that to lie out facts, and this is what I keep telling my friends or my colleagues, that it doesn't matter whether Modi is in power, not in power, whether, so I call that Gujarat model, then they're fake, this thing. So, I mean, I don't think we need to be, and I think we should not be, telling facts is our job. Trying to tell the truth as much as we know is our job. We get paid for it or somebody, I mean, these days we don't get paid for it, but I mean, but most people, so it's your job. You don't have to celebrate. You're not a James Bond or anything. Just do your job. If you don't have the courage to tell the truth, please leave. Go and sell shampoo and, coffee. Bad coffee makes more money these days. Do that, I mean, this is a very noble profession. I think it's a great privilege. How many jobs in the world allow you to tell the truth every day? Not even the Facebook CEO or the Google CEO has a right to tell the truth every day.
Okay. Now, Josie, my last question to you. Okay, you have compiled all these facts that can be quite scary, like, can prompt questions such as the ones I asked before, which is that, is this nation state a stable entity? Are these termites going to eat us and hollow us out and all of that? One of the things that you said some very, life-affirming things. You reminded us that, our fundamentals are still strong now, and that journalism and what our role is. One of the things that you talk about very confidently is the army, right? And you say that the Indian army is that one, entity or that pillar which is a little unshakable. It might have had its episodes of excesses in Kashmir or in the northeast and stuff like that, but the fact that it is controlled, it's ridden by a civilian administration, is an equation that you don't foresee changing, and you see that as a kind of a permanent pillar, as opposed to something like a Bangladesh or a Pakistan. Can we talk about that a little bit? I mean, where does your faith come from? And I ask this question why? Because we have had, in the last few years, coinciding with the rise of Hindutva and Modi, a string of very political chiefs, a string of very political officers, right? Where does your faith come from in the military?
Two, three things. One is, the last 10 years has been quite an aberration in India. I mean, we haven't had a government which has been so petty and manipulative of these things and has tried to politicize everything with a certain, Hindutva political ideology. So that is the sad part. But as you can see, it's not the urban centers which are telling Modi to behave. It is the poor in UP and Bihar telling you Modi to behave, and that's how change happens. That's my faith comes from the fact that I went to Sainik school. And I have hundreds of my juniors and seniors in the military. I've been in service, left service, I've held senior positions. And I also happen to know thousands of more military officers who are friends, admirers, acquaintances. And I can tell you that uh, if we believe that the idea of India will remain a democracy, and which I strongly believe at my age, then I have no reason not to believe that Indian military will remain a professional force. There will be aberrations of senior officers who find their political way up. There will be political appointments. There will be seniors who want to oblige some politicians. But if you think an army chief can ever command Indian army to come out on the street to stage a coup, then he's a fool, because at every layer of this military, our middle class and diversity has already seeped in. There are mistakes, there are problems. It happens in Manipur, it happens in Kashmir, and those needs to be held accountable. There is no question about it. But the fact is that some of the best ideologies of this country, some of the best uh, characteristics of India as a nation state have already seeped in. That's one part. The second part is
How? Delve into it a little bit. How do you think it has seeped in? What are these ideals that you?
because I think after the 60s, two things happened. One is the China defeat really humiliated. Second, the same VK Krishnan that we blame started Chinese schools, a network of them about 25. Now I think, again, this government has given away Chinese school in everybody. But
Yeah, they've sangified that also, no?
yeah, they will. They're good at damaging things which are working well. But those 25 Chinese schools have produced thousands of military officers who have gone into every layer of the military. So the democratization of the military leadership happened over the last 60, 70 years in a very systematic manner. And the same has happened with civil service for various factors, right? Because of Mandal design. So that is my biggest confidence, that I can tell you that if an officer has, if there are 5 officers who have gone to a school like the one I went to, of them I can bet majority 3 will stand up for the constitution, and that is the number you need. You don't need all the 5, and that is what is one of the greatest secrets of military. In Pakistan too, army has been a vehicle for social mobility, but still, as you know, there is far more social uh, structures which are more feudal out there.
Yeah, actually, by way of comparison, is it true? I heard somebody describing difference between the Indian and the Pakistani army. The fact that in the Indian army, you have, of course, you have like clan and caste-based regiments, but the officer cadre is invariably not from that clan or community. So if it's a Sikh regiment or if it's a Gurkha regiment, you will invariably have the officer class coming from other classes and things. So that by design creates a little bit of diversity in the structure. Whereas in Pakistan, I believe, now correct me if I'm wrong, if you tell me, a lot of the officers and all that come, number one, intergenerationally, and they're also they have these martial claims, and this feudal structure means that there are regional feudal lords who are also in the army, because you have many army officers who are regionally influential. Like I cannot imagine in India that an officer posted in some part of India will be regionally influential, politically influential. Is that how it works? I don't know.
I'm not an expert on Pakistan army to say,
Okay.
but what I can say is that what is for sure is that the Pakistani military has been built into such a mighty institution, even as their democratic institutions were degenerating, that today the military wants a state, not the state wants the military. So that in itself is the problem. But in our case, that's not the situation. For all the problems with our media, mainstream media, we have a diverse media sector. Our bureaucracy, we have we have defense secretaries who would refuse to sign files that army chiefs want them to sign. They will say, no, you are not obeying the rules. So I think we have built checks and balances, luckily, because of the Nehruvian, Gandhian, Patel, the generation that gave us a certain value systems of being nothing but a republic. And that is our biggest strength. The weakness is that the political class that is coming to power, and this is not just about Modi, is increasingly becoming smaller and smaller in their brains, and that is our fear. So I don't know what is after Modi, who is after Modi, but I hope it is going to be somebody who is more a visionary, who has a sense and celebrates idea of India, not talking about identifying people by the color of the clothes they wear, etc. Uh, but if if the Indian army, Indian military were to continue to get the kind of civilian oversight and the support and the professionalism that we have seen in the past, I think that we are in great safe hands. But as you know, any institution can be destroyed. It just takes systematic assault, right? And that assault is what has happened in Indian mainstream media. I mean, did we ever think that the mainstream media will fall like, a house of cards? I mean, house of cards like this so fast. So any institution can fall, but I have great faith because of the fact that the officer cadre is quite secular in the secular way. I'm not talking about the religious secular alone. I'm talking about the in the way they are, and it's a good institution. I don't have any doubt. It's not like an enforcement directorate or a CBI where you have people coming on deputation, people have no accountability, systems are not working, and you can go and raid anybody, and you can be called up by the minister saying that go and raid this guy, put him in jail. I don't think army hierarchy has lost that steam. That professional machinery exists. There are aberrations, but I think they're far better democratic in that sense and constitutional than the police forces in the states, than the enforcement directorates and CBIs of the world, or even our income tax authorities and all. I think if any of them, all of them, are to reach that standard of professionalism, it would be a great democracy. And that's a day when you and I can be assured that after this interview get aired, we won't get an income tax notice. I haven't got back my income tax refund for last ever since I wrote a story about a beef tallow license being, beef tallow was banned in the 80s by Indira Gandhi because of this big protest by Jain community because of the beef tallow being used in oil and all that. It was lifted under Modi's first government, and I wrote about it in Hindu, and within weeks my income tax refund stopped, and till date they're sitting on my refund. So I hope that when this interview get aired, I won't get another income tax notice, or you won't get another one. Uh, yeah, but I hope instead of sending notices to us, they will learn more things from the Indian military.
Mm. We barely have any income, but anyway, uh, Josie. Now, what to summarize, if you'll allow me. I mean, this interview. In this interview, you've tried a lot to kind of, paint this picture also of hope in the midst of all of this, crisis that we find ourselves in. It's almost like you are saying we are on the edge of the precipice, and the hope comes from the fact that we are not yet over the edge. Okay, that is the sense, I suppose, that comes through from this conversation. I hope I've summarized that correctly. But Josie, thank you so much for sharing these insights. And I think when we talk about isms and a show which is focused on isms, the fact that your journalism shines through, and that is I suppose something we can leave our audiences with, which is that our ism is also something which is politically relevant, is something which is contributing to the shaping of this nation, and it is very political, okay, but it cannot be categorized into these blocks of Marxist, capitalist, and all of that. I think truth is our North Star. I think that comes through quite strongly in whatever you said. Josie, thank you so much. I hope we have you here again soon to talk about all those stories that you have lined up. For now, that's all we have from Josy Joseph. Once again, to remind you before we go that there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes to put a show like this together. This show, for example, where Josie is sitting right now, is at the office of the News Laundry, News Laundry studio in Delhi. They collaborate with us, and that's how this thing is possible. And all of this is, of course, fueled by your contributions, by your subscriptions. So please consider supporting and subscribing to News Laundry and News Minute. That's all we have for this episode. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.